So a lot of you are probably thinking, hey, I've seen this video before, and yes you have, because I uploaded this ages ago and then YouTube took it down for nudity, even though there is none in the video at all. When I said this, some of you thought that it had gotten flagged by someone who got triggered by it, but no, YouTube themselves did this because they saw nudity in a video that didn't have any. So I appealed this immediately, and yet they confirmed that there was nudity in a video that does not have any. I was upset because I'm really proud of this video, so I got to thinking. And the thing that they might have pulled down the video for is the non-consensual snuggle struggle rap video Lindsay Ellis made before she became an SJW. People like myself bring this up to show while critiquing her, and I suppose it counts as nudity in my case if you can find it on YouTube anyway, unless she copyright strikes it, which she does. Now, I don't think this shit should go away because number one, I think her trying to hide it is really funny, and I want to keep bringing it up, and two, I worked hard on this anyway, and I want to keep it on the platform. So anything that might be inappropriate for the little babies that work at YouTube, I'm gonna replace with this picture of Rich Evans, and I'm gonna link the resources in the description so you can still watch this contraband content. I might as well talk about what Channel Awesome has been up to since making the video anyway while I'm here. Just as a quick update, they're still up to their usual nonsense and their dumbass fans are being sheep as per usual. On the Lindsay Ellis note, she came out with a book that I don't care about, and she got cancelled because of some normie ass, completely inoffensive tweet about some Asian movie with dragons and shit. I have no sympathy at the end of the day because you align yourself with the kind of people who get offended by everything and think words are literally murder, and then you get this shit coming after you eventually. It's just the way it works. You only like it when it isn't directed at you. Welcome to humanity. She made a response video where she rightly did defend herself against the accusations of racism and then immediately brings up Gamergate because it's living in her head rent-free. No one cares about Gamergate. It's a billion years old and fucking stupid anyways. But she has to bring up Nazis and shit because that's what these people do. It's all the right-wingers' fault. I say in this video that you're gonna watch that I wish her well and don't want to get into her content that much because I don't really give a shit, and I still mean that. I don't want to actually be mean or say anything too impolite, but quite frankly she does need to acknowledge her own mistakes and horrible politics if she wants to avoid these situations happening, because they will continue to do so. If you want an in-depth breakdown of her video, I am not gonna watch it over again for this fucking thing because it's too boring, but Deadwing Dork did a stream on it. I think he's fairly balanced on his takes on things, so you should go watch that if you want to. But I've rambled on for long enough. Commence the re-upload.
Yeah, I see that.
Welcome back to Wish for Death Island, Population Me, and today we're going to be delving into something that happens a lot. The downfall of a media company who seem to want too much without any of the prep work. It falls apart, all of the ugly things come out. That happens so many times. But this one is different. There's nothing quite like Channel Awesome because there's a whole lot more to the ineptitude than usual. No contracts, too many people, porn sites about the green M&M, and the general stagnation of the channel, featuring the most bizarre attempts at comedy that I've personally ever seen from someone who thinks that they're greater than the greats. Remember, I'm reviewing it so you don't have to. We're going to start off with looking at Doug and some of the shit that he produces, because that in itself is so strange that it does require some analysis. And then we'll tackle some of the people and take a look at the document and the response. I'm just going to bring up parts of the document that stick out to me because that's what, 60 pages worth of stuff? Not so awesome indeed.
Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it so you don't have to.
A lot of people look at Doug's early videos as something that doesn't entirely work today, but it didn't have to. It was a product of the more simple and reference-based style of humor of the early 2000s and did what it needed to do. Sure, if someone did that today it would look bad, but back then that was what you were almost supposed to do. The videos weren't my kind of thing because I wasn't on the internet in the early 2000s anyway, and looking back on it now, it's not my type of comedy. But I can imagine back then being the type of stupid kid that we all are, enjoying some of them. If he did skits, they were short and to the point, and the majority of the video was made up of talking about the movie, and they weren't that long. Now, I'm not saying that having long videos is a bad thing. I like long man content, and I think the bigger the task you're tackling is, the bigger the video would be in order to get everything out there and define all of your terms. However, if a video is pretty simple, there's no reason to stretch it out for the sake of more content. Comedy, especially, is all about timing, and if you don't tighten up your jokes, they won't feel right, even if they're written well.
Waiting for her downstairs. You spidery broad, I'll kill you! I'll kill you! No hard feelings.
Like I said, Doug wasn't a comedic master, but he seemed to have the basic understanding of when to cut the joke off. It's kind of strange how he seems to know less about what he's doing as the years go by, or at least that's how it looks when you juxtapose his latest and earlier content.
The beginning of a movie without dying.
First of all, leave the fourth wall breaking to me, because only I seem to be able to do that.
Okay.
Second, that's like the oldest trope in the book. You really think that writer's this talented? You're already shot, aren't you?
Bop.
No! Who's responsible for this?
It was me! Typical Middle Eastern European American gangster joke.
You killed my only love. Now I'm gonna destroy you in the most horrific way possible.
And what are you going to do, Comrade Pizza Face?
Even some of them in the middle kind of period, the skits. I'm not a fan of skits unless they're really short or they're what Red Letter Media does because those are funny, but these started to get more unrelated. You can almost make like a gradient. There was this one which stems from a staple joke of his where he drinks because the media is bad. He gets a bigger bottle as time goes on until he needs a really big one, and the people in the helicopter are drunk because they drank all of that big one.
Now, I do have this tradition of drinking a rather large bottle of Jaeger every time I view one of these, and seeing that this is somehow the absolute worst out of all of them, it's time to push the button.
I know where I'm vacationing this week.
Christ, I need a drink! Hey! Who drank my Jaeger Planet?
Tonight, we are young. So let's set the world on fire. We can go higher. Higher than the sun.
There's the sun.
It sounds kind of like it could work, but it starts out simple, just him pulling a bigger bottle out from under the desk for a second, and then the skits get longer because he has this like PNG of a helicopter and it just lingers way too long. Feels like you could use it as a measurement of sorts for how the comedy started to drag along and how it started to degrade over time. When you look at nowadays, or even a couple of years ago, it's really bad. It's not even a review. The review segments take up the time that the brief skits in the old videos used to, and the new skits are the majority of the video. It's inverted. How the fuck did that happen? Deadpool 1 is just him blowing himself.
Deadpool?
Not in a review of my movie. Decent costume, clever writing, good-looking guy underneath.
And being too self-aware, especially with these bizarre choices in how to rephrase the movie. The Rise of Skywalker one in particular is quite strange. For one, the annoying orange is in it and is somehow the least cringe thing about the video. I never thought that there would be a universe that I would be in that would have that be a thing, but it is. But the rest of it falls flat because the movie is already bad. The entire Disney trilogy sucks ass, and we all know this. In someone else's review like Weekend Warriors, the jokes come from the stupid shit in the movie and relate to it, and it contextually works with pointing out why something is dumb. It points out specific problems, and the jokes don't go for too long. Doug's reviews, on the other hand, his jokes in his skits seem to be gun funny, alcohol funny, movie bad, I am Doug Walker, and dated references to other shit or his own characters. People just wave their arms around and declare their one joke or characterization in their scenes, and then go back to doing it again in the next scene. Doug seems to think that the joke is supposed to be you basically explaining the joke instead of doing the joke. And the videos go for like half an hour to 1 hour. All I can think of when I watch this is, why is this necessary? What are you doing? And how could you just not explain what you mean like a normal human being? On top of his comedy, there are some other odd remarks as well, some of them being weirdly political. Now, some people think that Doug is an SJW, and I don't really get that impression myself. Yes, I think that he panders to them on occasion, but not in the way that makes him one. And yes, I know that the term is overused anyway and people throw it at others despite them not saying anything SJW in the slightest. It's kind of nauseating to hear so much, but I do understand where it's coming from. Doug takes time out of his reviews to pander by strawmanning something in his video for no reason other than brownie points, and it does take away from the review itself. Kinda like how in something like Batwoman someone would say something really political that has nothing really to do with it, just for the sake of it. It would take away from any story that they had, but in Batwoman the story is bad enough anyway. In the Mad Max review, Doug is supposed to be showing arguments regarding the controversial nature of the movie, and showing how they clash or how either side might have a point. But instead he just randomly mentions men's rights activists and equates them with misogyny, which is blatantly false, and then goes on about how one side is bad even though it's a complete mischaracterization. It seems like it's entirely tilted from the point of someone who has a really deep investment in this ideology and wants to skew these things, but when you take a look at Doug's other reviews, all he really cares about is himself, so it just feels inconsistent to who he is.
They're meninists.
Can you believe they gave a gun to a chick in this movie?
Tell me about it! A man tweeting right now to let the internet know my disgust!
That's a manly thing to do.
Hell yeah!
They act like they're being discriminated against when a woman wants to do something that a man does.
We had that. It was called the 40s.
Well, they're not very good at growing up.
And then randomly going off about the toxic fanboys for wanting a good product. It's like every stupid video essay I've seen from someone who likes The Last Jedi. What is the point? There's also points where he showcases his other comedic staple that I didn't mention before, but loud is funny. At points in these reviews when he needs to put a joke in but can't think of a joke to put in, he just screams. This man is a meme. I already did a video about his The Wall review, it's kind of an old video, but that's a good example of how much he misses the point. But to come back to my point on SJWs, I think he isn't one because he's too inconsistent with his pandering, and he's just throwing out hooks hoping the audience will bite because he's kind of lost and floundering more and more as time goes by, and he drifts further away from the early 2000s. Since the early 2000s is the only thing that he really knows, he clings to it and his channel stagnates, so he desperately flounders for a way to get someone new to watch. That's really all it is. I personally reserve SJW for someone who's frothing at the mouth, dogmatic and overly sensitive. Doug is just like an old man with a limp who accidentally locked himself out of his car and is trying to chase after it as it goes down the hill. Let's talk about Demo Reel. Doug wanted to kill his nostalgia critic character. You see, to Doug, this wasn't about becoming a critic and continuing his internet character. This was about his road to making a stand as the best of the best in his medium, and producing movies and series instead of just reviewing them from other people. People who love a medium often produce content too and fall into reviewing stuff that they love because they want to spend more time in the topic. I mentioned this last video, but I'm a writer. I've been trying to work on things in the background, but reviewing stuff is fun to me as well because it's still a topic that I like. On top of that, a lot of people can make the transition of changing their core content in a good way that goes well with their audience. The important part of this is that the people who would build their videos from passion and use the resources of this new revenue and new passion to learn about their craft and help it reflect in their content. They improve as they go along. So even if it doesn't entirely work out, there's a sense of professionalism there that at least gives them some return. A lot of this comes from being self-aware. Knowing what you do and where you stand. This is easier said than done, but once you start working on it, things fall into place. Part of making these reviews that is so useful, personally, is that I've sometimes realized that I've been doing some of the things that I hate in certain storylines, and I've used the review process and the research to think about it more and then apply it to my own work. It's a learning process. The problem with Doug, however, is that he doesn't want to learn. He will tell others that he wanted to try it both ways, where he would do their idea and his idea, but he would always go with his idea. It was to the point where it became a meme with the people who worked with him. In comedy scenes and demo reel, he always has to have the last word on a scene or a joke, and it stretches the joke into something way too long, and it's not even funny in the first place, but now it's just unbearable. He dubs over lines from other people and makes them do it over because he wants to micromanage, but he also doesn't want to go through the effort of actually reshooting or rewriting, something that would make it better. It would be fine if this was just a YouTube video, but Doug has the vision of something grander. He's trying to produce something solid as a show, and it's supposed to be professional. When you make content criticizing things and then come out with your own thing, there'll always be a small group of people who would try to make it out like you're doing something hypocritical even if you're not. So I understand that there might be a case for a few of the people here who intensely hate Channel Awesome to not like anything else that Doug produces, but the difference is that Demo Reel and Pop Quiz Hotshot really do everything that Doug doesn't like. He really is criticizing things and then doing the exact same thing even worse in his own content. For one, in Pop Quiz Hotshot, he keeps doing that thing where he screams the joke point instead of actually doing the joke. This time he takes it a step further by constantly explaining the exposition of his character. His character is supposed to be this psycho host who kidnaps people to be in his quiz and then kills the loser and forces the contestants to be his friends because he doesn't have any friends. He just explains it and goes, "My childhood bad," and talks about killing them.
Welcome, my friends, to Pop Quiz Hotshot. You are my friends, aren't you? Yes, just nod or else I'll do something terrible to you. There you go, there you go. Yes, you know, I gotta say, I don't usually do this. I don't usually kidnap people and hold them against their will. But, you know, I just gotta say, ever since I was a child, well, I think nostalgia, I think happy thoughts. But when I think of childhood, this little nerve goes off because I didn't have that many friends. But you're my friends now.
Exposition and explaining too many things are things that Doug has always pointed out in his reviews, to the point to where he has a song about it as a running joke, or at least he did in his older content.
Exposition, rush it out ASAP.
How does he not see that he's doing it worse than the movies that he talked about? In this show, he's also really mean to the contestants for some reason, and that's kind of the whole humor aspect. He's mean and gets very, very angry when someone has a joke that steals the spotlight away from him. The last part isn't even part of his character, you can just tell that he's getting angry and uncomfortable.
Enough whiskey turns any Tim Burton movie into a comedy. You've clearly already stolen his kitchen tiles, so...
You know, I'm
Really? That got an ooh? You're giving him an ooh. You only get one ooh
I've watched
in the
way
game
more
show.
He's also trying to do a kind of whose line is it anyway thing where the points don't matter. Like it's comedy focused instead, but he doesn't understand the basics of why this doesn't work for a show like in the way that he's doing it. And also the fact that he always manages to pick the most useless, boring trivia, and it's mainly about himself. It would work if people were allowed to bullshit about the trivia more, as if they were all being treated as equals here, but Doug doesn't really want to do that. It's all very to the point, and Doug doesn't let anything go through without being the center of it. He needs to have the last laugh. When I took drama in high school, I learned about this thing called blocking, where someone on stage closes themselves off and doesn't accept ideas or engage with their teammates, which can be especially shitty for breaking the flow of improv. It seems like he does this in demo reel and pop quiz, and also does this to an insane degree in the making of the videos or anniversary movies because he has to be the only creative force in charge. For demo reel, the basic premise is that they're a group of people getting started making short films spoofing movies, and it goes into their chaotic dynamic behind the scenes in black and white for some reason. I think it's supposed to be a mix of The Office and Tropic Thunder, but fails to understand why either are funny. I can dig this kind of humor. I like Tropic Thunder, The Office, Black Books, IT Crowd, Archer. You can ape those and make something really funny with this premise. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about demo reel and hate it so much, even though I'm not invested in Channel Awesome, is because this was a great premise that would be really funny, but they don't do it right. I'm just mad about the wasted potential. Let me take you through the first episode. The Dark Knight begins rising. He opens the video explaining what it is and says that the show will be every 2 weeks, and in between that, he will have extras. He was clearly gearing up for this to be a really big thing that would completely take over the channel and put a lot into it. He was fully going to kill the critic and make it a game show and skit channel. This first skit is The Sixth Sense. He does the explain the joke thing again.
It's been a rough day, hasn't it?
Yes, Dr. Bruce Willis.
Like, yes, Bruce Willis was in the movie, good job. Why is this funny on its own? A little later on, Commissioner Gordon is played by the woman, and the joke is face.
Who is that? High-pitched Commissioner Gordon.
Haha, yes, she has a woman voice. Why is this funny on its own? In this beginning skit, these ghosts are the references to his reviews, and they start coming in and they need to call the Ghostbusters.
Who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters.
Who are you?
Ghostbusters! Chicago Division.
Even though most basic jokes have the who you gonna call line subverted by putting in something else besides Ghostbusters, and it's kind of expected at this point. It's bland and unoriginal on its own, but the point is, that's really the basis of the joke and then you build off of it. That's something that people kind of expect for you to do. Doug, on the other hand, just says Ghostbusters as if it's just the reference in itself that's funny and doesn't even trying to build off of it. There's no payoff for this, except for them showing up and looking kind of fat and saying that they're from California and dumpy looking, and this, again, could be something that is the basis of a joke, but it's kind of messed up because it's like half done and there's no lead up to it that's actually funny. For example, a more basic thing that you would see in the most basic of comedies would be like, who are you gonna call? The janitors. Who? They're the California branch of the Ghostbusters. Why do they call themselves the janitors? Copyright, or something like that. Keep in mind this isn't funny, but it's something basic that you would expect. I keep saying the word basic because that's the problem here. There's no basic foundation. I usually wouldn't be talking about a basic joke as a positive light, but for Doug, it's kind of strange how he seems to somehow have so little idea of media that he makes even the basic jokes look well done. At least if he structured it this way, it would be like, hey, it's not funny, but if you work on your jokes a little more, it can be funny. But this is just like, have you ever watched a movie before? Also, the movies referenced in this thing are the Nolan Batman movies, The Sixth Sense, and some other old shit. This can be timeless if you write about them in a certain way, but if you just rely on the references itself, like, hey, this movie exists, you don't make it funny purely from the dated references. He seems to cap his references at a decade old or somewhere around there because making new references to new things makes him allergic, I guess. It may be because he started out doing old reviews and never got out of the habit, but it's not... it doesn't work. Even if it was topical, it still would just be reference humor. It would generally just be forgotten about as time went on. If Doug reviews movies that do reference humor like this, he usually doesn't like them, so why is he doing this himself?
I'm the friendliest ghost to ever!
Eat your soul.
The jokes that the ghosts make just revolve around a reference character says something about burning in hell. This is also in line with his gun is funny humor, where characters will randomly be violent or have guns and that's the entire joke. It ends after some boring ghost hunting with Doug being taken out because the lady says, oh, he's a ghost too, and screaming is funny.
Get him too, he's a ghost.
What?
Boys see ghosts and that's the most of it, and they're scary too. This is your good old friend Randy saying boo.
You could have done something else, like one of the guns starts vacuuming him up too and he doesn't know why, but then she says that she was going to tell him that he was a ghost, but she didn't get to in time, so he gets all grumpy and disappears with the rest of them. The next joke is that the director, played by him, has an ego and wears a fedora and wants to be a big star, and he's stuck being shitty and can't get anywhere, but he's too delusional to see it. I know, interesting. The joke is that the shows are bad on purpose, and then it goes to an interview documentary style like The Office, but in black and white, and you are supposed to get the real sense of comedy or jokes from there. When looking at it this way, it's immediately apparent that this brand of humor is supposed to shine, focusing on the characters and not the skits themselves. You focus on them arguing while filming, things going missing, the shit breaking. We can see elements of what's going on set, but don't actually ever have to see the finished project because that's not the point. That way you get each character very fleshed out, watch them grow, and see hints of what they can do on screen, but it's more interesting to see what they do off screen. Like this one, you get a shot from the audience very confused about how Batman has a Michael Jackson glove in the skit, but the vast majority of the episode can be focused on how they ended up losing the glove or something like that. This is a blatant misunderstanding of how to structure, and it shows Doug's way of not listening to anyone who gives him feedback on his ideas. Think back to the song about exposition, and the joke that this director is making. Look at me, I have an ego, I want to be in the shots and I don't listen to anyone. Which is funny considering what people have said about him. He has a hat, but nothing actually notable ever comes of it. It's just, wearing a hat is funny. Like, you could present him with his ego and the way that he criticizes others, have something about his insecurity by having the hat go missing, and he has a slapstick gag of covering his head with different ridiculous things and panicking, so it gives us an idea of how he works. Or even some development where he realizes how much he does need the others on the team, only to revert back to his usual ego self when he gets the hat again, and the rest of the characters rolling their eyes but sticking with him. In the beginning, when the cast is introduced, there's no cut to anything that actually shows off the dynamic, it's just more of Doug's random reference skits. And then there's this cameraman who's like from Germany or something, and then he has a Russian name or something, which is them being incompetent and not knowing how to do anything. What this could be reworked into him pretending that he's German, but they didn't realize because they're too ignorant to know the differences between the names, and how some shadier shit is going underneath the surface than usual, but they kind of just cap it as he's a creepy German man who is on the run. There's also this character who's delusional about how she's going to be a good actress and doesn't know what's going on or what the weirdos she works for are doing and that they hate her, but the show is so full of other characters that fit the same arc that she's just kind of there and nothing really hits. Despite how hard it tries to make you think that there are different characters, Doug writes them all the same. You even have an easy joke to make right here, with the construction company next door doing some gang shit that kills people, so why not use this in a way that doesn't just end up being haha loud gun noise funny? Or you could have a recurring thing of them interacting across the series and it gets more obvious every time, but no one notices.
Alright, Alfred, you can turn around now. Terrifying, isn't it?
No! It's Mario! Why are you dressed like a Mario brother?
Mario scares me. It's time the rest of the world shares my fear. A plumber who steps on turtles. That's rude. And then he kicks them out of their shell, takes their home and bludgeons them to death with it? Man's a psychotic. You're absolutely sure we don't want to go with the plumber?
Right. I warned you. Right in the eye.
Alright, I'll do bats!
Even jokes that do have a semblance of structure, like the joke where he has a Mario costume and comes back to it, when you think that he's going to be in the Batman costume, it kind of works, but he ruins it, because the timing is off once again. He has a Spider-Man costume at one point and asks Alfred,
I am Spider-Man.
Titan.
Seriously?
Yep.
Does he wear red too?
Yep.
Oh my god. What are the odds of two guys representing a spider with the color red?
and he could have just walked off at that point after Alfred says yes. We've established all of the information that we need for this joke and can move on. But instead, Doug makes a fuss about red, and then moves on because he needs to say something in every shot. It's not enough just to have Alfred say yes and then just cut it. Doug needs to have the final thing to say in the skit.
I'm gonna be a superhero.
Okay.
That's it? Okay. I didn't even have to convince you.
I've lived off your fortune for years now.
The way he announces he's a superhero and Alfred says okay, why not just cut it there instead of going on about it and beating the joke into the ground? This skit then has him rescuing Gordon and Rachel, and the cops can't find the building because the GPS isn't working. They're just screaming because Doug thinks everyone has to scream to be funny, when them being in silence with the GPS going off and then the explosion in the background works way better. Sex offender shuffle? But it's with villains, and it's really bad. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh cool, and I'm here to say no inflection in your voice is a-okay. With the leak of shadows, I'll make Gotham.
And they're so offbeat that it's driving me insane, and it sounds like they just rapped the lines first and then tried to mix it with the beat in post but didn't give a shit.
It's little sense. I was a nice guy, but now I'm deranged.
How my frown got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, don't go too far. I'm gonna tell you a little story about how I got these scars.
They did this in 2013 and they had to reshoot a dozen times for the pilot because they didn't sound dampen or anything and didn't research what they were doing, as Doug was an expert who didn't want to research in his own mind. The show was the site owner Mashard's idea, and Holly, the HR manager, had to tell them that the game show needed prizes because they're so retarded that they couldn't figure it out. And they tried to rig the games in Doug's favor. They released the episode when Indiegogo threatened to investigate after nothing happened with their promises, and Rob and Doug are embarrassed about it, but they also stopped after 12 episodes because that covers the legal shit for Indiegogo. There was also another comic show that they promised with the production, but it didn't really go anywhere. So yeah, all of this is pretty terrible, but at least that's not the worst thing he's ever done. Just a quick intermission before we continue. This question was asked of me on Twitter recently and I was going to reply, but I couldn't really find a way to do it with Twitter's stupid character limit, so let me do it here. I think we get way more leniency from men, at least in my personal experience, and we get protected from drama because people just kind of protect women on this platform a lot more than men. Men are kind of left to fend for themselves, and the worst that I've gotten is from other women personally. Women can be catty and vicious both online and real life, but I think more so online because they just can be, and I know that I can be capable of that even though I would rather not, but they just blame men because it's way easier than looking inward. I had a look at this person's channel from who made the tweet, and they seem to be in the drama beauty guru community, which is one of the most toxic, vicious types of communities anywhere, and one that mostly women are involved in, because it mimics this sort of high school shit where someone could have the same color dress as someone else and then there'd be a 4-part drama saga on why that person sucks because they're a skank because they wore the same color dress as me. So I think that when you need to look at that, and if you're getting hate for that one, I don't think you should be getting hate for stuff, and that sucks, but type of community where that stuff is rampant anyway, and since there's mostly women involved, I think that if you're blaming it on men at this point, there's something else going on here. Thank you for the question, and back to the video. So now we have more context for why Doug's work isn't that good, we can look more into the people involved. This isn't to bully them or anything, it's just part of the reason for why they collapsed, and the interesting things about stuff that kind of foreshadowed the document and its reception. Doug has been around for more than a decade and started off doing this shit with very short retellings of movies in a comedic way. He used footage from movies until YouTube started cracking down on videos because of shitty copyright stuff, and went to host everything on Channel Awesome. They would go back to YouTube eventually, but during the meantime ended up having a successful partnership with Blip TV until that whole thing folded. At their height, they would make about $250,000 per year. When they eventually came back to YouTube, they kind of got stuck with the copyright thing again, and it resulted in the Where's the Fair Use thing, where he made a video about that because companies like Studio Ghibli were striking their videos down. This resulted in the skits, I think. He started using them to avoid copyright, and I get it. When I review things, I intersperse the footage with still frames to avoid copyright because it's just annoying otherwise, but skits don't actually reflect the content or the topic, and Doug doesn't seem to put any effort into trying to make them reflect anything, and it ends up being the worst option that you could take. He used to do stuff with AVGN and the other creators and ended up making the anniversary videos from this. These were the same harmless stuff that you might look fondly back at with other older creators, but the later ones have become more hard to watch, because he starts to grow an ego and micromanage everything, so it makes the content even worse. Mainly kick-assier, Doug's ego made him lose the plot with what his audience wanted.
When looking at the Google Trends, you see a sharp increase all the way up until the end of 2012, where every related search term suddenly bottoms out, and that corresponds directly to the 4th anniversary video, To Boldly Flee, which, I kid you not, has a runtime of 3.5 hours. Now, it's not the video itself that's so awful that's responsible for that decline, but what came at the end of the video, and the related follow-up that Doug himself put up.
Okay. The big question, obviously, on everybody's mind after seeing that is this it for the nostalgia critic? Is that it, that we're not going to do anymore, that I'm going to hang up the coat, we're not going to do any more weekly reviews? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is.
And it's at this point that everything goes off the rails, because this is when Doug decides to kill the nostalgia critic.
In terms of him and his brother Rob, and the CEO Mike Michaud, they would barely communicate with each other, and Doug got special treatment and got let in on the business meetings despite being only listed as talent under the company and not the manager. All of the other creators, depending on how popular they are, were kind of treated like shit and they weren't given anything. Mike himself barely did anything and wasn't helping anyone. When he got approached by someone saying that another creator had been harassing and grooming someone, Mike got more upset at the fact that the messages could be leaked rather than the fact that someone was being groomed. He would look away when approached for help for those things usually. The Walker brothers are egomaniacs and fighting a lot for power. Doug had the impression that the movies were also going to make him the next Spielberg, and he doesn't have the basic skills, so he still operates at a middle school filmmaker level. One time, Rob and Doug fought about the music used in one scene of the movie and didn't talk for the entirety of the day. Doug got his M. Bison cape in a scene ripped by accident, and Doug got so mad at this that him and Spooney didn't want to look at each other. He was also very into having this cape, to the point where it got kind of obsessive. In the behind the scenes of the first movie, you can see that he's taking things a bit too seriously. Spooney was a respected creator, and people would watch him review basically anything. He would make regular videos, but this would turn into a downward spiral of shit as he lost his work ethic and started becoming more reliant on live streams where he would yell at his audience and promised a movie that would never happen. He hasn't updated his Patreon in like 3 years, and he lashes out at people who ask about it, and seems to be diagnosed with a new illness every month. In January 2012, there was a post on the Channel Awesome website about Spooney and them parting ways because he wanted to pursue different things. They gave him a fond farewell and it looked amicable, But when you look at what happened, it was his tweet about someone else on the site, who he said that he wanted to chain up in his basement Onision style. He then goes on to have his conversation with Obscurus Lupa, brought up the conversation again about a month later with the rape joke. Then he goes on a tantrum about stuff because it got brought up again and tells them to stop spreading the comments. He then makes a sexual assault joke at someone who tells him to stop, and then he just keeps going on about it. Look, I think that rape jokes can be funny. Offensive comedy is funny, but the thing is, it's only funny when you have what it takes to pull it off. Any other time it just ends up being incredibly awkward. This is one of those times. It's just not a funny joke, and it's kind of mean-spirited. It doesn't seem like it has a purpose to be there. The best thing that he could have done is just not say anything more about it. I understand that part of the issue was the fact that someone else brought it up a month later, and this seems to be something about them having their issues in their private lives, and it kind of leaked out into this response, but even then, you kind of gotta just deal with it and shut it down quickly instead of just going on about it. People thought that this was a bit too coincidentally timed because he had broken up with his girlfriend recently as well, and the breakup was pretty nasty according to him. But he and the others involved would clarify that he needed to just break away from Channel Awesome and it wasn't necessarily their doing. Another creator, Lord Cat, discussed how much Spooney sucks in his podcast, and he was referring to the Betrayed Me clip that you probably heard before.
Officially for the first time on a show, I've discussed it before, but let's discuss why I left that guy with the glasses. Now I am breaking my agreement here with that guy with the glasses by discussing this, but I think it's time the whole world, Spooney, heard just how much of a fucking idiot you truly are. You and that other idiot, Joe. When you were at E3 that one year, and you decided to go up and down the hallways screaming about XCOM's betrayal, and Joe decided to ask people, can I choke you on camera? Guess what happened, Spooney? Guess what fucking happened? The whole gaming industry turned its back on me. Not you, not Joe, not Blistered Thumbs, me. I went to GDC the following year, Spooney. I went to GDC the following year, and I had a chance to interview Notch, Mojang, Specifications, Minecraft. Had a chance. A fucking chance. He was hot then. That was going to be huge for This Week in Games. That was going to be huge for the stream. It was going to be amazing. And you know what happened? The representative at Mojang caught wind that we were going to interview Notch. And he stepped in. And he said, oh, I've heard of you. You're with that guy with the glasses. You're with Blistered Thumbs. And I tried to tell them, no, I'm not. But he said my name was associated with them. And he heard what you did. Making a fucking jackass of yourself at E3. You fucking moron. So they shot it down. And then word spread at GDC. Oh, I heard about you. You were the guy at E3. They thought I was the guy at E3 making a jackass of everyone. I was there trying to be a legitimate member of the business of the gaming industry, and I've worked my ass off to separate myself from you. Every time. You just don't get it. Every single fucking time. You act like a complete fucking jackass. It has repercussions for everyone you're associated with, and you don't give a shit. That's why I left that guy with the glasses. I can't fucking stand you.
And so I saw the footage, and there was one word searing through my mind like bolts of fire. And that word, betrayal! What? Betrayal! Betrayed me! This game sucks! It is nothing to do with XCOM. Nothing! Nothing!
He seems so angry about it even now, and all of this happened because of Spooney being noisy and stupid. Spooney also came on to his live stream later on and talked shit and went really quiet and left. And the pause was the same energy as I would prefer it if you would be quiet.
I don't jump onto someone else's stream and scream about how what they're doing is wrong.
No, you're not. You're fucking laughing your asses off and being stupid chuckleheads.
Why did you come in?
To tell you guys you're being really disrespectful.
You came in the call just to shit on this.
Oh, like you're shitting on this game any more than you are, Chris. We're just joking with Jason.
Why do you have to come in and shit on this? Like we're lashing out at him. Jason was laughing.
Hey guys, bunch of big news lately. I haven't had a chance to report on it till now because I was out of state. But I guess the big news is somehow you guys have reached the Patreon goal where it was listed that I would start work on a movie, and I was just I was blown away by this. It was like, you guys are the best fans in the world. Oh my god.
As time went on and the movie that was promised didn't happen, his Patreon numbers dropped. He was slowing everything else down, including his uploads, and making excuses and posting way too much on Twitter, even making an account for his dog with this like weird furry language, and it took up even more time for no returns. He also made wrestling videos, and the majority of his audience didn't understand or want this. The Patreon gold tiers were not done at all, even editing together sessions of Cards Against Humanity, which wouldn't take that long. He also claimed all of his tweets were a scripting process, but it was mostly just arguing with fans and talking like a dog, so I don't understand how this is scripting, and he says that he doesn't want to justify himself to them. He stagnated and only posts his streams when he's very depressed and doesn't even say anything. He bans everyone in the same way that fucking Wings of Redemption does. He's dropped down to 109,000 subs on the time of recording this, and his streams have slowed down too. The last one was about a month ago at the time of this, and he still has his ego. He got suspended from Twitter for tweeting about suicide, and his account still isn't back. Nowadays, Spooney goes on about how sick he is. He has a Tumblr list of diagnoses including lupus, fainting conditions, bipolar, the flu, headaches, panic attacks, sleep apnea, and staph infection. In the mid-2000s, he made The Lightbringer, which was a bland knockoff of other superhero characters, including Green Lantern and Batman, and one of the scenes has him running away from a rape going on, and this affecting his psyche, so he ends up developing Green Lantern powers. It's as if Mista just decided to keep walking and got shot instead. And they also have rape and slaves and just going on in broad daylight because the city is so fucked up. Everyone has very lumpy arms. He also fights his evil counterpart and then meets himself, Linkara, who is basically Jesus, and not the fun kind of Jesus. It also got posted on Something Awful, and he reacted with a blog post. He even removed some of the rape plots after some feedback because there were more rape plots, and women came forward about him talking to their friends about why they don't like him, as if he was trying to like investigate why. So he decides to create a Top the Fourth Wall. It started out as writing, he ended up making videos, and his videos are still going strong because he does have a work ethic. Like, say what you want about the guy, he's still making content. There were stories of him hovering around the conversation and only chiming in for saving the Whammons. Doug has pretended that he yelled at other people because Linkara kept standing around and kept going up to him and asking him to talk up to people about them disrespecting Whammon. Linkara was once standing outside the door of one of these asking, "Did you learn your lesson?" and muttering like a neckbeard. There was a search for an older video of his which then ended up with some porn posts being found. One of them was on a trap forum. He also wanted to fuck the green M&M. He wanted to regrow his foreskin. There was incest porn, more dicks, more traps, more weird roleplay. He would also link to his comic in these erotic roleplays because he wanted to shill. He was also into corpses and necro shit. He admitted it was him too. Lindsay Ellis had to review certain movies because Doug said that they needed a female version of the critic to review the female movies that he didn't want to touch. I don't like using the word sexist because of how overused it is nowadays, and any woke person can shut someone down by screeching it at them, but I would be lying if I said that there was nothing fishy going on with the way that Channel Awesome treated women. This is only on the surface, as well as some other stuff that Lindsay backs up in the document about how Mike Michaud treats women and snaps at them. So in this regard she's right, but not so much on some other things. She once made a rap video about rape with other people on this website. What is it with Channel Awesome and rape? And she used to make more edgy content, but recently she started getting really woke and strawmanned AVGN when he didn't want to review Ghostbusters 2016. There was an abortion documentary, which I don't know where it went, and when Mr. Metokur found the rape rap video, she copyrighted it. He talked about it and it got taken down, so I guess she found it and tried to scrap it since it wouldn't fly with her audience nowadays. In 2017, she got so fucking drunk that she got put in a cop car after being hostile to them, and kicked the inside of the car as well as headbutting against the cage, which got this picture. Everyone on the website seems to have TDS now as well. Nowadays, Ellis makes those feminist essay videos that I personally really dislike, and because of that, like, I have nothing against her as a person, I just really don't like postmodernism and the woke nonsense, so I'm just gonna leave it off here. Because as much as I don't like this stuff, again, it's not the point of the video, and she's still going, doing what she loves, and seems to be successful at it, so good for her. I have really no reason not to just let her be. Lotsa auditioned for the site after being a huge fan and making content like theirs. He also made a fundraiser for $700,000 for some shitty parody movie. He got trolled by someone who claimed to be Mike and Jay from Red Letter Media. They told him to go on this really long road trip to come meet them at the studio because they were really impressed with his work. Once he actually got there, he found out that it wasn't real and they had to decline. He then claims that he never drove out, and he says that something like he was only pretending to be retarded because I guess he thought it was funny, but he regrets it now. According to him, this didn't actually happen, but according to Rich Evans, there might be more to the story. Again, there's a whole thing on him and it's kind of awkward, but it would kind of stray too far from the topic, but I still thought it would be funny, so.
It was a while back where 4chan tricked some poor schmuck into coming out here. 4chan posed as us, said we were looking for on-air talent, and got some schmuck to try and find our studio for an audition. This is the cruelest fucking thing you could have done.
That is
I've been referring to the document where I can, but this time I'm actually going to full-on talk about it. Firstly, I'm not trying to prioritize things based on what I personally think is worth listening to more, because I'm not trying to be the judge of whose voice is more valid or anything like that. These people are all coming forward with horrible things, and I'm not trying to be the arbiter of which one I think matters more. I'm just going through things that I feel encapsulate the failure of this company in the best way, and to have a sense of brevity that still gets to the main point of the document without going through all 60 pages. Though, of course, I think that you should read the whole thing, linked below. Also, I'm going to be presenting what Obscurus Looper and Mars Girl say with a lot more detail, but the ones that follow afterwards, it's just because they repeat the same thing. That's why I'm kind of cutting it out so I don't repeat too many things. Basically what you'll see is every single person seems to be ignored, their titles will change without them wanting it, having Patreon links removed, and being shamed into doing things, being shamed into apologizing. It's more of that type of stuff, and while that type of stuff is horrible, I don't want to keep saying it. Also, in terms of the allegations, a lot of stuff has been verified since Channel Awesome's response, but also for the sake of clarity, I'm going to slap a big alleged on the screen right now for the ones that might not be, so keep that in mind. Starting with the intro, the document is supposed to be something to clear the air and cover stuff from people who had grievances, and specifically targets the management skills of the Walkers and Mike Michaud. It was one place to read all of the stories instead of Twitter and blog posts, and people in the document had different reasons for getting their stories off their chest, but a commonality was some sort of response and acknowledgement from Channel Awesome. There were also two people who were in the same position as Mike, so there were three of them, but they left. One of them was Mike Ellis and the other one was Michaud, and I want you to remember those names. They would try to avoid conflicts over small things because apparently Michaud was not good at social stuff and speaking, but he would explode over small things as well because he kept them so bottled up, and do random shit like getting angry at women for things that the men did and overall treating women very harshly. He had a weird thing about women. 3 women were kicked out when their male counterparts did the exact same thing and got no punishment for it, even remaining on the site. He would get angry at women and call them troublemakers if they spoke up against him. All communication was done via a Skype group chat instead of emails, and due to the amount of people on the group chat and how important some of these updates are, that's the worst thing that you could do. Michaud would disappear and not even talk to them for long periods of time. And keep in mind, there were huge amounts of people. They had to talk to Michaud, Rob, Holly from HR, who was fired later on, and Michaud didn't even want to talk, so he basically couldn't be reached, and Rob, who was very unprofessional and would call them names behind their backs, so you basically had no one to go to if you had a problem. They took on so many people that they had no idea what was happening with the site, so Rob once thought someone who was asking for an interview was actually a producer. They never told anyone anything, and the subset, Blistered Thumbs, was shut down without anyone knowing, so many creators who were affiliated with that found out by logging in and seeing it was gone. The company policy section when people were being taken on was labeled coming soon and never actually ended up being anything. So they technically had no policy, but you had to talk to Rob for any sense of policy, and Michaud was only labeled as in emergency situations only. Even then he wouldn't even contact you because he just didn't want to talk. They had no contracts besides 1 video per month, which was also later on up to 2 videos per month. They had these weird rules in place that no one really followed unless they wanted to get rid of you on the site, where they'd slap one of the rules on and claim that you broke it somehow, and then they'd use that to remove you. Rob was approached to talk about the rules many times and he had no idea what was going on. Fellis was told to apologize to Doug personally for making a joke about demo reel on Twitter. Doug is also a tech boomer and doesn't know how to do anything like recording commentaries using the proper mics, and even had to get someone else to press record on Skype because he couldn't figure it out. If Doug had a problem with something, it was like they all had to have a problem with it too, like it being frowned upon when they went to MagFest and other conventions, because he had a bad experience there once and he thought they all should have the same opinion as him towards them, even though they were using their own money to go to the convention, so it shouldn't be a problem. They also tried underpaying artists for exposure, basically, and the person who made the music for the movies was paid peanuts, and Michaud even tried taking and selling their music for himself. He had to be told not to do that. They had to be told to have water and catering on set because they didn't know that was something that the actors would need. The only contracts that they would have for the site in general would be for the movies. Channel Awesome would pay for food and accommodation during hours that they were on set, but there would be no consideration for the actors getting paid for all of the other work that they have to put in. As long as they were on set, they were on the job. Anything they had to do off set, which was a lot, including making their own costumes, was not paid for. They weren't really paid that much for their time and made no revenue for the DVDs. Asking for compensation, they were told that they didn't have to do it, and they should be grateful for getting the opportunity. They were made to sign the contract, which included stuff about insurance and injury, and any crossover videos that they filmed would go to the company for costs, so they weren't allowed to own their own videos in that regard. They had to edit and work overtime, and told it was for the privilege of being there. Doug's style of direction was to do it more like Doug. They also, for the longest time, only had one camera, with Rob using it, and had to have a meeting about getting more than one camera. 4 people were injured on the set of Suburban Nights, including someone who was taped to the wall for so long that she passed out and none of the safety precautions were taken into account. This got more annoying as the movies went on. Some of the fans didn't even get the DVDs that they ordered because the orders were messed up and none of it was fixed. They even tried to guilt trip them into doing crossovers for the money to pay for their staff, which half of the jobs were done by Fellas, so he had to work extra for his own pay. No one knew Doug was killing the critic character until they saw it in the script, and the lines made it sound like all of them were retiring just because he was. So they were concerned that some of the fans might think that the whole channel was getting shut down just because of Doug, and Doug didn't seem to understand why everyone was upset by this. Where there was a stalker scene where one of the characters, a female character, is approached by a terrible creepy stalker, and Doug's version of events was that the woman was a cold hard bitch for saying no to the stalker, and he wants her to go on to have a date with him, because I guess that's how he sees things. They also had to fight about the rape scenes in the movie, because the people involved in the rape scenes were deeply uncomfortable with doing it, but they had to do it because Doug said so. He would also make them perform scenes on very little sleep, and very overworked, while refusing to do things that would make the production faster and easier and more professional. Doug had no idea how miserable everyone was because he was constantly in his own world and thought everyone was enjoying it as much as he did. In 2013, they brought all of their problems to management and Rob laughed it off, especially with To Boldly Flee. Their complaints weren't really heard and it kind of went nowhere because it was empty promises, including newsletters that they promised would update them weekly, but they ended up doing 2 of those newsletters before not doing them ever again. They barely ever updated the site. Blistered thumbs and Michaud's dumb bar thing were still on the drop-down menu. They made the banner for the site Doug and pictures of all of his characters. When the producers asked about this and whether or not they could be featured on the banner, they were promised that they would change the banner frequently, but that was never done. When Michaud was looking into redesigning the website, he went to the people who designed the White House website. They said $50K and he goes with a $100 template instead. In terms of organizing how you got to see which creator was which, they just had a massive drop-down menu with all of the names with no description, and the layout was incredibly poor, so you had to just investigate which person was which instead of having an easy description. They also had a scheduling set up for videos which was broken immediately, and it took 6 months for them to remove a drop shadow. Michaud waits for a person to be alone before talking to them, before cornering them about using mid-roll ads on their videos, because apparently revenue was going down because of ad block, even though that wasn't the case. Revenue was actually going down because they put money into a shitty game show and pulled the other popular shows off the air. Michaud also tried to claim that other creators were complaining about Lupa. When asked about this, these creators confirmed that this wasn't true. He was just trying to gaslight and just be a terrible person. They also tell Doug, who calls him later, to say that they need to limit the mid-rolls and never mention the terrible intimidation and other horrible shit that Michaud did. Patreon became a thing, and a lot of creators used it to make money, so they didn't have to annoy people with mid-rolls and all of that sort of stuff. The links were mysteriously removed, and Michaud got really angry because he said that they were e-begging and doesn't want to link to that on his website. Rob then claimed that the higher-ups do it because it's executive authority, which was blatantly him saying that it's okay when I do it, but you don't get to. People guilt-tripped them because word got out that they were treating their creators this way, and they were finally allowed to post their Patreons, but not as links, it had to be in the video. After not replying to a Skype message for 15 minutes, this person was removed from the site. They also buried the goodbye message on the site and misspelled Fellis's name. Mars Girl participated in the Nostalgia Chick contest and got runner-up to produce content. They initially did this system where they would have to send over their videos to Mike and the team, who would then upload it, and she was promised payment for these, but she never got any payment. So then she opened up her own blip channel, and Mashad got so mad at her for doing that without permission, even though it was just his fault for not actually explaining that she couldn't do it. Mashad would routinely mislabel videos on the site because he wouldn't watch them or read the notes that came along with them. He would just type up whatever he saw. This led to people being angry at their creators for mislabeling their videos. When she told this to her audience to try and clear things up, but Mashad threatened her to the point where she had to apologize to the point of self-flagellation for him to actually do anything about it, because she thinks he probably wanted her to feel shame. She was told to stop communicating with the Screw Attack forums because it was seen as competition. All of this led to her isolating herself from everyone and quietly releasing videos, and this led to even more problems with the Skype chat room being introduced. Many of them were expected to make their own costumes for films, and they weren't paid for the creation in most instances. They would be paid for the costumes if they brought the receipts for what they bought and would turn all of the costumes into Channel Awesome. Outside of the small group of the most popular creators, none of the other ones would be treated well. They'd be ignored and pressured, and it was like they didn't matter. Holly was HR, but they didn't listen to her. They only listened to her when they were falling behind and needed her. The site lost a bunch of stuff in 2011 because it was only stored on a single drive. The shitty bar site was also her job as well, but it was Mashad's shitty idea and it fell apart because he wouldn't let them actually do it properly. Mike Ellis, one of the former manager people, would try to get her to be with him despite him being married, and only got more upset with her as time went on. There was nearly a fist fight between Mashad and Ellis, and some handwritten notes where Ellis was threatening to fire her. They had to put her in a safe house for a couple days because they were concerned that he would come after her. One of the guys had a sword and the rest had baseball bats. Right, okay. She had to work around her getting surgery, and she wasn't allowed to take any proper time off to do things concerning her surgery. She was asked to work every day of the year, including weekends and holidays, and she had to beg to get time off for updates or anything, including surgery. She missed years of personal time, and the only other person who knew how to update the site was Mashad, but he made her do everything. She had to drive to the studio after the surgery, even though the doctor said that she shouldn't do that, and then she was informed that she was no longer employed. She had to sign contracts that barred her from the industry for 3 years, essentially blackmailing her, especially after this very vulnerable part of her life, otherwise she wouldn't get severance pay, and she couldn't pursue them legally at the time because of how much pain she was in. Jesu Otaku was going to be fired for criticizing the site, but told them that they would go forward with the chat logs, and the site panicked. Chaos D1 was removed from scheduling for missing one thing after not missing a single thing for 5 years, and this was because his wife had to go to the hospital. He had posted more to make up for it, but these were obviously ignored. He had these things scheduled, but because they didn't read what he had to say, they just thought that he should be fired. He would post things on his Twitter innocently, and then they'd pull them up and say that these things were bad and accuse him of shit, gaslight him, and be incredibly bitter. Sean from Epic Fail. Ellis was drunk and kept messaging him on Skype, and later gave him the excuse of being so intoxicated that he didn't even realize what he was saying, despite the fact that none of the messages really had any spelling mistakes or other things that would happen when someone is super intoxicated. He was really pushing if Sean was gay or bi, and then being incredibly horrible with sexual advances for 2 hours straight, without Sean replying once. This is just him spamming messages for 2 hours. It was him saying things like, "I'm not trying to scare you off, just give me a chance," and calling him a sexual cupcake. He also tried to use Seinfeld as a pickup line. Sean then messaged Mashad, and Mashad said, "I told him he couldn't do this shit, and I need to take care of it." For Lindsay Ellis, she was one of the people who had to do the rape scene, and even though she was deeply uncomfortable, she still had to do it. They ended up compromising with her making rape noises behind a door where they filmed, instead of her actually being on camera and going through it. It was just a rape joke for the sake of the rape joke and didn't have anything to do with anything else. And then further, we have some anonymous accounts of people who were groomed on the site, and it was not known whether or not the site owners knew about this at the time. Now, with anonymous accounts, it's extremely difficult to believe them, and it also needs to be treated like something that needs to be investigated, and people are innocent until proven guilty. We've seen cancel culture happen way too many times. However, you'll soon see these things being verified with Channel Awesome's own response. During their first response, they posted a wall of text on Twitter basically saying nothing. They say that they respect everyone and fluff, and they legitimately say, "We're sorry you feel that way." And they didn't actually apologize once or even directly acknowledge anything. They said that they were taking steps, but didn't say what any of those steps really were in specifics, and didn't do anything with the criticism. They said that criticism had to be productive, as if they were accusing the people in the document of lying without providing any proof. This was basically one of those makeup gurus posting screenshots from their notes application on Twitter. That was all it was. They then went on to do a website response. They say things in the document are lies with vindictive intentions. The response in general is very defensive, even more so than the initial response. They say that they try to keep things private all the time, and the evil people who wrote the document are the reason that it's public, so they need to make it public too. It's as if it's not their fault and everything is some weird attack. They go on with the accusations and try to debunk them, but it comes across as really slimy and passive-aggressive. They put the worst part of the document right up front. This is also from the anonymous source, which I considered to be the weakest source. They basically released all of this stuff to the point where it's true now, with some very, very suspicious chat logs that confirm what was being said. Jew Wario was a groomer, and he was the guy who committed suicide. They claim that they didn't want to release the predator's name, but the chat logs have all of this information conveniently left in that would let anyone who knows Channel Awesome stuff to know who it is immediately. That's just so slimy. They don't even directly answer other stuff being alleged, they just give more evidence for stuff but make it sound like they're debunking it. It's very strange. They even stop halfway to talk about how many viewers they pull in and just suck their own dicks. Act as if that ego trip is a response that debunks anything that was said in the document. They also don't act like there's a difference between what they do now and what they did before, as if the timeline that Mars Girl painted is non-existent, which is a blatant lie. All in all, this is one of the most bizarre responses I have ever seen. With this, Channel Awesome has gone back to making content. The latest controversy with the wall is still way in the past now, and they don't really seem to give a shit. It's kind of admirable how they've gone so long and done so much in terms of terrible things, yet they've managed to pull viewers from their most dedicated fanbase and keep going. The resolve is cold and unmoving, but that's what they need to survive. However, it is bittersweet, as they will continue to stagnate, and from a money standpoint, this might work for a while, but from an artistic standpoint, Doug is dying inside. As much as I feel sorry for him in the soul-crushing aspect, it's kind of hard to feel sorry for him when you know that he has every opportunity to make it better, but he doesn't do anything. At the end of the day, this is just me, one person with their perspective collecting what thousands of others before me have already said, and despite trying to be neutral, it's still just me being me. If you want the full picture, I implore you to go to the resources in the description, and thank you for sticking around this long, especially people who routinely watch these hour-long videos of mine. An hour can be a lot to ask of someone's time, and I'm grateful that you chose to spend it with me. See you next time.